Today we are going to dive into the thoracic cavity to study the right and left pulmonary cavities that contain the lungs and their associated pleura. Take this classic example of a fist in a balloon. The fist represents the lung, and the surface of the balloon that is touching the fist represents the visceral pleura. Continuous with this visceral pleura is the parietal pleura, which is represented by the rest of the balloon wall that is not touching the fist. The parietal pleura lines the pulmonary cavity and adheres to the thoracic wall, mediastinum, and the diaphragm. The area of continuity between the visceral and parietal pleurae is the pleural sleeve. The pleural cavity is the space between the visceral and parietal layers and contains serous pleural fluid that makes for frictionless respiration. The parietal pleura has four parts. The costal part covers the internal surfaces of the thoracic wall. The mediastinal part covers the lateral aspects of the mediastinum. The diaphragmatic part covers the superior surface of the diaphragm on each side of the mediastinum. And lastly, the cervical pleura extends through the superior thoracic aperture into the root of the neck and extends over the apex. Sternal, costal, and vertebral lines are the areas of continuity between these four parts of the parietal pleura. It's important to realize that the lungs don't completely occupy the pleural cavity during expiration, so there are areas where layers of the parietal pleura will be relatively close together. The costodiaphragmatic and costomediastinal recesses are shown here. The left costomediastinal recess may be larger or less occupied than the right because of the cardiac notch in the left lung. The lungs are the major organs of respiration and are divided into lobes by horizontal and oblique fissures, the right having 3 lobes and the left just 2 lobes. Each lung has a blunt superior end called the apex that is covered by cervical pleura. The costal surface of the lung is adjacent to the sternum. The mediastinal surface is medial to the mediastinum and posterior to the sides of the vertebrae. And lastly, the diaphragmatic surface rests on the convex dome of the diaphragm muscle. The 3 borders of the lung, anterior, inferior, and posterior, represent where the different surfaces of the lungs interface. The root of the lung is enclosed by the pleural sleeve on the mediastinal surface of the lung. It connects the lung to the heart and the trachea and contains the hilum where vessels, nerves, and the main bronchus enter and leave the lung.